Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, February 3rd, 2020. I am Dave Biddle, very happy to be joined by the Dean of Ohio State football recruiting, Bill Kurelic. On today's show, Bill and I are going to look at some of the top 2021 recruits across the nation that are on Ohio State's board, that there's mutual interest. So we're not going to go over all of the top recruits in the nation, but we're going to go over a lot of them, guys that have mutual interest in Ohio State. But before we get to that, this 2021 class, Bill, number one class in the nation so far, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, and Mike Hall was the latest to join over the weekend, the number one defensive tackle in the state of Ohio from Streetsboro. He joined up, again, four-star defensive tackle Mike Hall, another great get for Ryan Day and his staff, Dean.
Yeah, that was huge in that not that he wasn't likely to be a Buckeye, because he had said on numerous occasions to me that Ohio State was his top choice, so it really was expected that it was going to happen. But it wasn't expected necessarily to happen this past weekend. And, Ryan Day, people have wondered about him not having junior days, and his philosophy is actually working out quite well. He wants a family atmosphere at Ohio State, and what he's doing is bringing in, he and Mark Pantoni are bringing in smaller groups. They had 3 prospects visit this past weekend and trying to establish more of a family-type atmosphere, just the same atmosphere that he had with the team this year. And it's being received very, very well. Mike was really happy that he and his mom could sit down with Ryan Day and Larry Johnson and talk and meet Kerry Combs and get all their questions answered in a very, a setting that wasn't, it was just the coaches and his family. And it ultimately he decided because of that he was going to go ahead and move his announcement up. He wasn't going to wait until his birthday in June, that he was going to announce because he felt really, really good about his commitment. So, that strategy is working well. I've talked to a number of other recruits that have been to Ohio State, and they really, really are impressed with the family atmosphere at Ohio State. And it's big in that, Mike Hall could well be the only defensive tackle in the state of Ohio that the Buckeyes offer this year in the class of 2021. He's that good, and he's that much better right now than the other guys out there. So to lock that guy down early, it's really big. And you put in with Jack Sawyer, defensive end, 5-star, you've got a great, great start for the Ohio State 2021 defensive line.
Absolutely. They need defensive tackles in this class. They could not have afforded to lose the top D tackle in the state, and he's a really good one. So getting Mike Hall was huge. And as you mentioned, they started off the class with Jack Sawyer, the number 2 player, regardless of position, in the country, the number 1 defensive end in the country. So, yeah, pretty nice when those guys are in the state of Ohio and they lock them up early. All right, let's get to, as promised, some of the top uncommitted recruits across the nation in the 2021 class. Let's go all the way out to Washington. Same high school as G. Scott, Eastside Catholic in Sammamish, Washington. JT Tuimoloau, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, the number 1 defensive tackle in the country. Do the Buckeyes have a legit shot with him, Bill?
Yeah, and to help with the pronunciation, I just call him JT. Makes it a lot easier. But yeah, they really do have a shot. I mean, they have a very legitimate shot. JT doesn't do a lot of interviews and that type of thing. But I do know people that are involved or close with his recruitment and close with him, and they absolutely say that Ohio State is a big time player for his services. One person told me that if they had to guess right now, their guess right now is that Ohio State would be likely the team to beat right now. Of course, he's not deciding right now, but still, it's good to know that Ohio State absolutely is a legitimate contender there. Washington's going to be a contender, and the school I've mentioned as being kind of the dark horse because you don't know what's going to happen out there for sure is USC. If they have a great season and their coaching situation is all looking very positive, then they could be a big player down the road for JT. Oregon's pressing really to get up among his top choices, but right now Ohio State's got an absolutely legitimate shot at him.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. So I'm sorry if there's any USC Trojan fans listening to the show. I know USC Trojan fans love the Bucknuts Morning 5, but here's my prediction. USC will not have a good year, and their coaching situation will just get worse. Clay Helton seems like a nice guy, but would not want him coaching my football program, so I doubt USC is going to have a good season. All right, that's another young man that's going to really test my pronunciation skills here. Emeka Egbuka, he is the number one athlete in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. Another young man out of the state of Washington, number 9 overall player in the country, regardless of position. Do the Buckeyes have a good shot with Emeka?
Well, I think you got to start with saying that never bet against Brian Hartline when it comes to recruiting. I mean, he's
right.
involved in that recruitment, and that probably says plenty right there. And yeah, they really do have a shot at Emeka. Certainly very interested in Ohio State, and I think Ohio State's going to be in it till the end of him. It's interesting that Ohio State has 2 outstanding wide receivers committed, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jaden Ballard. Great start. 2 guys that I could absolutely see ending up at Ohio State are Emeka Egbuka and Tuimoloau. Both of them, obviously, Brian Hartline is involved in their recruiting. And interestingly, those 2 guys are also very highly considering Clemson. And, it's still early, but it would not shock me at all if both of those players ended up deciding between Ohio State and Clemson. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know that it's going to happen for sure, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. And right now, for Tuimoloau, I think Ohio State and Clemson are the 2 schools to beat, and I think it will come down to those 2 in the end for him.
Going back to Tuimoloau, I should just go with JT like you do. I'm pressing my luck here. The fact that G. Scott's from the same high school, and G. Scott's, obviously part of Ohio State's 2020 class. He's already here. He enrolled early, along with the other 3 excellent wide receivers in that 2020 class. Are they close? Do you know anything about the relationship with G. Scott and JT?
Oh yeah, the families know each other certainly, and it's not, I guess a little slightly off the subject, but related. It's not going to hurt Ohio State at all. That the reports I'm hearing is that G. Scott is off to a very good start at Ohio State, both with what he's doing in the winter workouts and how he's adapted, made the adjustment to Ohio State and everything. Everything's going well there, and certainly that doesn't help, or I shouldn't say that. Certainly that doesn't hurt when you're talking about recruiting one of his teammates.
No doubt about it. And these young men are getting the first time in Ohio history we've skipped winter. It's like 60 degrees yesterday and sunny. It's going to be the same way here in Columbus today. So I will take that. I haven't shoveled my driveway once all winter. It's crazy.
I saw the sun. I saw the sun yesterday for the first time in 8 days, and as I sit here in beautiful, lush, suburban Columbus, Ohio, I'm watching the sun come up again. Great thing to see.
I know. 2 days in a row of sunny days when we had no sun for like 8 days. But, I mean, the temperatures have been nice. But, yeah, we're finally getting some sun to match the temps, which is really nice. All right, several more guys to get to here. Tony Grimes is an interesting one, the number 10 overall player in the country, the number 1 corner in the country, Virginia Beach, Virginia. Where do the Buckeyes stand with Tony Grimes? Well,
they have a shot. Now, I'm not – I guess I've painted a pretty – good or rosy picture for the first few guys we've talked about here. And Ohio State has a shot with Tony Grimes, but I'm not going to kind of paint quite the picture with the guys we've talked about so far as with Tony Grimes. I think Ohio State has a shot. I just don't have the quite as strong a feeling right now with him. Again, I think the Buckeyes have a shot, and it's going to be interesting now with Kerry Combs back here in Columbus, what that means for Tony Grimes exactly. It's obviously very early in the recruitment of Tony Grimes when it comes to Kerry Combs. He hasn't been back at Ohio State very long, but still, along the same lines of Brian Hartline, it's really hard to bet against Kerry Combs when it comes to cornerback recruiting. Kerry's goal every year is to get 2 potential first-round NFL draft choice type corners. That's, that was his goal when he was here before, and I'm sure it's the same. So, we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, and he was achieving those goals. Those are, as you know better than anybody, those are the 2 all-stars, Brian Hartline and Kerry Combs as far as recruiting. I mean, those guys, I never will count out the Buckeyes when those 2 guys are involved. And Ryan Day has proven to be an excellent recruiter as well, as you know. The next young man, I'm just going right down the list here of top targets you can get on the Bucknuts page, 24/7 Sports, click on recruiting, click on top targets, and you can look at the guys that the Buckeyes are at least warm on. The next one on the list, the number 1 weak side defensive end in the country, number 16 overall player in the country, Landon Jackson, out of Texarkana, Texas. Where do the Buckeyes stand with him?
Well, that leads me to a shameless plug.
Yes.
I talked to Landon yesterday, just before the Super Bowl, and he. I will have a story on Landon late yet today on Bucknuts.com. So, but the short of it is that he's interested in Ohio State. I would kind of paint that one in the same kind of picture as Tony Grimes. He's interested in Ohio State. We'll see what happens. Ohio State has one great defensive end already, of course, in Jack Sawyer. They're really making a strong push for Tuimoloau Adelaide, and I think you might have him on the agenda here to talk about. But they're making a strong push for him. I had an article about him on Bucknuts yesterday, and I really I like Ohio State's chances with him, and we'll see where it goes with Landon. Ohio State, I think, is going to. It looks like, as you'll read later today, get a visit from him at some point, and he is interested, and we'll see what happens. He has never been to Ohio State, so we'll see. Providing that visit happens, how he likes it at Ohio State.
Yeah, you mentioned Adelaide. Anything else you want to say about him real quick?
Well, I like Ohio State's chances. I'm not sure that's kind of the bottom line is that where Ohio State stands with these guys, and Ohio State stands very, very well right now with Tuimoloau. It doesn't necessarily hurt. It doesn't really help a lot or hurt a lot, but I think if anything, maybe it helps slightly that he is now at IMG where Ohio State is having some success. Of course, they just signed, I should say, Legend Cavazos out of IMG. But Tuimoloau's there now, and Ryan Day was at his school on Friday, and as I wrote yesterday, he is going to make a March visit to Ohio State, and that'll be followed by an official visit in the summer. And I think they'll get that scheduled late. Ohio State will, so that it's fresh in his mind when he announces his decision August 1st.
The last 5-star on the list, Will Shipley, all-purpose back out of Matthews, North Carolina, ranked as the number 1 all-purpose back in the country, number 21 overall player in the country. Where do the Buckeyes stand with him, Dean?
He's one of the 6 or 7 outstanding, really great running back prospects that Ohio State is going after, and has a really legitimate shot to land, I guess you'd say. But in his case, to be honest, I'm not sure that they have as good a shot with him as they do with some of the other guys, other outstanding running backs they're going after. I think in the case of Will, Clemson won't necessarily be easy to beat. We'll see how that one goes, but right now, certainly I've got other guys like Corey Kiner and Donovan Edwards and a few others, Evan Pryor, maybe Cody Brown. I have those guys as being better chances to end up at Ohio State than Will.
We are going to talk about some of those aforementioned running backs here in a minute. Before we get to those guys, Rocco Spindler, number 6 offensive tackle in the country, number 40 overall player out of Clarkston, Michigan, number 2 player out of the state of Michigan, which is, they actually have a surprisingly good amount of players out of the state of Michigan this year, as you know. Do the Buckeyes have much of a chance with Rocco Spindler?
I think they do, and I think Michigan will be hard to beat. But I met Rocco this summer when he was at Ohio State's camp, and I just found him what a great young man to talk to. I really enjoyed talking to that young man, and it was clear from the very first time I talked to him in person this past summer that he has a very legitimate interest in Ohio State, no doubt. Greg Madison has done an outstanding job of getting the ball rolling on his recruitment, and Greg Studrawa and Ryan Day are now obviously involved, and he is seriously considering Ohio State. His most recent visit that he made to Ohio State went extremely well. It's going to be tough to beat Michigan for him, no doubt about it. Notre Dame's going to be a factor too, but the point is right now is he absolutely is legitimately considering Ohio State.
Is it because he grew up a Michigan family? Obviously, he's from Michigan, so, it could just be that close to home. Do you know, did he grow up as the family Michigan fans?
I don't necessarily think that's the case, although, again, he's grown up in Michigan and all. I think he's just going to – he will make the best decision for himself, irregardless of where he grew up. But, it's not easy taking a kid out of Michigan that grew up not too far from Ann Arbor. So it's not going to be easy, but the legitimate interest is there.
Interesting. And then the next young man, the aforementioned Donovan Edwards, the number 2 running back in the country, number 3 player in the state of Michigan out of West Bloomfield, Michigan. Where are the Buckeyes staying with Donovan Edwards?
Well, he's been to Ohio State a lot, that's for sure. I think Donovan's been to Ohio State, I believe, at least a half dozen times. And from that you can obviously gather that there's a very legitimate interest there. He wouldn't have made a half dozen or so trips to Ohio State if he's not legitimately interested. Did visit Georgia. That visit went extremely well. I think Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan are all certainly high on his list. I wouldn't rule out Notre Dame. I think it's too early to tell, to be honest, where he's going to end up. But again, he's a guy that Ohio State absolutely has a chance to land. And all these running backs that are on the top targets list of Ohio State, they're all outstanding. And I would be. If I were the Ohio State coaches, I'd be perfectly fine with landing any one of those 5 or 6 guys to get things started. But if you gave me my choice, it'd be hard for me to pick against Donovan Edwards. He is that talented.
Just 4 more guys I'm going to ask you about here on the Bucknuts Morning 20-ish. I'll get you out of here, Dean. Ja'Kalen Johnson, number 5 corner in the nation, number 51 overall player in the country, St. Louis, Missouri. Someone I know very well named Bill Kurelic has a crystal ball in for the Buckeyes for Ja'Kalen Johnson, I believe. So I'm guessing you feel pretty good about this one.
Yeah, I do, and I feel even better with Kerry Combs now entrenched at Ohio State. Kalen has told me, how excited he was when he heard about Kerry Combs coming back to Ohio State, and that's kind of what put me over the top with my crystal ball pick. I do think I do really, really obviously like Ohio State's chances there.
Next young man I want to ask you about is J.C. Latham, another young man out of IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, number 13 offensive tackle in the country, number 79 overall player in the country. Where do the Buckeyes stand with J.C.?
I think his decision comes down to Ohio State or LSU. And my feeling right now is that he will likely make official visits to both schools before he decides. He's a Midwest kid, though. He, has family in Wisconsin. Greg Studrawa is doing an outstanding job of recruiting him. Like I said, I think it'll come down to Ohio State or LSU. And right now, if I had to pick, I'd say Ohio State wins that battle.
Very good news for the Buckeyes. Last two kids, both running backs, Evan Pryor and Corey Kiner. Let's start with Evan Pryor out of North Carolina, number 6 running back in the country, number 86 overall prospect. Where does Ohio State stand with Evan Pryor?
Very high on his list. You know, he has his top choices. He hasn't necessarily named a leader, but right now I feel like Ohio State is one of his top 2 or 3. I've talked to Evan a number of times, both in person and through messaging and on the phone, et cetera. And I always come away with the vibe that he really likes Ohio State. I think that the Buckeyes are one of his top choices, one of his top 2 or 3. I know they're one of his top choices. I'll go a little farther. I think they're one of his top 2 or 3 at this point.
And Corey Kiner, the number 1 running back in the state of Ohio, out of Cincinnati, Roger Bacon, number 8 running back in the country, number 106 overall. Do you think Corey Kiner will be a Buckeye in the end?
I got to start the same way I did with Rocco Spindler. You know, what an outstanding young man to talk to. Corey Kiner is a really good young man, and in addition to being an outstanding running back, he's a kid that I really like, both talking to him and both as a player. I think in the end, his decision will probably come down to 2 schools, Ohio State or Michigan. And that one's a hard one to say exactly because I know he really likes both schools. But he's a kid that right now, if I had to say which way he's going to go, I think Ohio State has a little edge there.
Great insights on today's show from the Dean of Ohio State football recruiting, Bill Kurelic. I really appreciate it, Bill. And thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. Hope everyone has a great day. Let's try that Buckeye swag, best in band in the land.